Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid.
In a world often filled with confusion and misleading teachings, Jesus Christ stands as a lasting source of hope for humanity. This hope is beautifully reflected in the life of Pope John Paul II, remembered not just for his role as a spiritual leader, but also as an extraordinary pilgrim. Over his 26-year papacy, he made an impressive 104 international pilgrimages to 132 countries, traveling a remarkable 1.7 million kilometers. He sought to spread faith and inspire renewal, famously encouraging us to let your spirit ascend, let your spirit descend, and renew the face of the earth. Pope John Paul II passed away on April 2, 2005, after a long and impactful pontificate. Known for his mysticism and many talents, he was canonized as a saint in April 2014, and his remains now rest in a tomb beneath a side altar in St. Peter's Basilica. Before leaving us to reunite with God, he shared a final message that would touch hearts worldwide. In 1978, he made history as the first non-Italian pope in over 400 years, and his influence shaped the Church and the world. Even in his last moments, as he struggled with fatigue and fading strength, he reached out to God, whispering, "Let me go to the house of the Father." The Vatican later released a detailed account of his final hours, shedding light on the circumstances surrounding his death. This report stands in stark contrast to the mystery surrounding the death of his predecessor, Pope John Paul I, who died just 33 days into his papacy. Biographers have noted that this clarity serves to honor Pope John Paul II's legacy. He battled Parkinson's disease for nearly a decade, with his health declining significantly in his final months. The official narrative began on January 31st, when the Vatican announced he would suspend audiences due to flu-like symptoms, which led to his hospitalization. Despite his brief return to the Vatican, he faced further health challenges that highlighted both his struggles and his unwavering spirit. On Easter Sunday, March 27th, Pope John Paul II made a public appearance from the window of his Vatican apartment to deliver a blessing to the gathered crowds. However, it was clear that his health was deteriorating. He struggled visibly, unable to speak the apostolic blessing as he had done in the past, and instead, he silently raised his right hand to bless the city and the world below. This brief and poignant gesture marked one of his last public acts. Just a few days later, on March 31st, he was rushed to the hospital due to septic shock caused by a severe urinary tract infection. This infection led to a collapse of his cardiovascular system. His body temperature soared to 103 degrees Fahrenheit, indicating the seriousness of his condition. And as he lay in the hospital, a special mass was held at his bedside, signifying the gravity of his situation. The morning of April 2nd, 2005, marked the final hours of John Paul II's life. Early that day, he received the Eucharist, a sacrament that was deeply significant to him throughout his life and papacy. Despite his weakened state, he whispered a poignant message in his native Polish, "Let me go to the house of the Father," expressing his readiness to meet God. By 7 p.m., he had slipped into a coma. Following a cherished Polish tradition, a small candle burned in the dimly lit room where he lay, symbolizing a vigil of hope and prayer. Archbishop Stanisław Dziwisz, a close confidant of the Pope, celebrated a final Mass at his side. At 9:30 p.m., the 84-year-old Pope took his last breath, surrounded by the prayers of thousands who had gathered in St. Peter's Square below, offering their heartfelt support. In accordance with Vatican protocols, his physician performed an electrocardiogram for 20 minutes to formally confirm his passing. Pope John Paul II left behind a legacy of faith and words that echoed his lifelong commitment to the Church and to those who suffer. On Good Friday, just days before his death, he appeared on television from his private chapel, where he prayed while watching the live broadcast of the Way of the Cross from the Colosseum in Rome. In a heartfelt message to the faithful who participated in the Good Friday observance, he urged them, "Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and join us as we remember the Holy Mass of our Holy Father." These words reflected his deep connection with those who shared in the suffering and passion of Christ. In his final reflections, John Paul II emphasized his solidarity with all who suffer, expressing, "I suffer so that God's plan may be completed." He likened his suffering to the mission of St. Paul, declaring, "Now I rejoice in what I am suffering for you," viewing his pain as a way to fulfill God's purpose and to continue sharing Christ's message with the world. These sentiments were a testament to his belief that suffering, while inherently difficult, could be embraced as a path toward deeper spiritual meaning. Even in his last moments, Pope John Paul II maintained a spirit of prayer and compassion for those in pain. He gazed upon the cross with deep reverence, praying for those who faced hardships, and offered blessings to those participating in the Way of the Cross through radio and television. His unwavering commitment to his mission and his faith served as a final testament to his role as a shepherd of souls. Throughout his life, John Paul II was a model of resilience and strength, qualities that he believed were essential for saints. He frequently invoked the intercession of the Blessed Mother, asking for her guidance and support, particularly in times of suffering. Mary, Queen of all saints, grant us the fortitude and reliability needed to serve your Son and spread this divine fire, he prayed, recognizing the ongoing challenges posed by a secular world. He believed that these challenges required a timeless commitment to the teachings of the Church. John Paul II often spoke about the world's tendency to trivialize love, reducing it to fleeting sentiments or commercial gestures like greeting cards and chocolates. He called on Christians to rise above these shallow interpretations and to embrace a deeper, Christ-like love. He taught that the core of our existence is the love of Jesus, which surpasses all else. What truly matters is that we are loved by Christ and that we love Him in return, he emphasized. For him, the love of Christ was the cornerstone of all meaning, and without it, everything else was secondary. Throughout his life, Pope John Paul II experienced multiple instances where he narrowly escaped death, events that many of his followers viewed as miraculous. He passed away at the age of 84, following a lengthy battle with illness, having served for more than 26 years as the Vicar of Christ. However, before he reached that point, he encountered at least 4 life-threatening incidents that shaped his life and faith. After the passing of John Paul II on April 2, 2005, the world witnessed an outpouring of grief and reverence. During his funeral, thousands of attendees chanted "Santo Subito," which means sainthood now, a testament to the affection and admiration people held for him. Known as the People's Pope, long before Pope Francis earned that title, John Paul II had an extraordinary ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He saw the potential of modern travel and media as tools for evangelization, using them to spread the gospel and foster a message of goodwill around the globe. His many visits to different countries, regardless of their religious or political backgrounds, served to revitalize local Catholic communities and emphasize the Church's global mission. During his pontificate, he canonized more saints than any of his predecessors, reflecting his belief in the universal call to holiness. Over the more than 26 years of his papacy, John Paul II also authored numerous significant theological and doctrinal documents that shaped the direction of the Church. His travels to distant lands, coupled with his historic gestures of friendship, dialogue, and reconciliation, characterized his tenure as one of openness and engagement. These pilgrimages set the tone for his papacy, making it one of the most dynamic and outward-looking in the Church's history. John Paul II's impact extended far beyond the Church. He played a crucial role in global geopolitics, particularly in ending the Cold War. His support for the Polish trade union Solidarity and the broader Polish freedom movement was instrumental in challenging communist rule in Eastern Europe. The momentum from these movements ultimately contributed to the fall of communism across the region and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. By providing moral and spiritual support to the nonviolent movements of resistance, he helped initiate a peaceful transformation that many thought impossible at the time. For those who lived under the looming threat of nuclear conflict during the Cold War, John Paul II's achievement was remarkable. His influence brought about a nonviolent revolution, directly opposing the calls for military confrontations and preemptive strikes that could have led to catastrophic loss of life. His role as a global peacemaker, combined with his deep spirituality, solidified his legacy as one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Through his resilience in the face of danger, his embrace of modernity in service of the gospel, and his impact on global politics, Pope John Paul II's life and work made an indelible mark on history. He remains a symbol of courage, faith, and the power of forgiveness, a legacy that continues to inspire millions around the world. His stance on international issues was nuanced. While he supported humanitarian interventions to alleviate suffering, he remained firmly against the idea of preemptive war. This was particularly evident during conflicts in the Middle East, where he consistently voiced concerns about the potential consequences of military actions. At the same time, he was deeply troubled by the effects of economic globalization, especially on impoverished countries in the global South. He challenged wealthy nations, including the United States, urging them to increase their commitment to development aid and to address the widening economic disparities between rich and poor nations. In a world often dominated by self-interest and competition, John Paul II emerged as a prophetic voice, calling for compassion, solidarity, and reconciliation. While John Paul II had great admiration for the American people, he did not shy away from critiquing U.S. policies that he believed were morally misguided. This included standing against the population policies promoted by the Clinton administration, which he saw as undermining the dignity of human life. He was equally critical of both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush's wars against Iraq, opposing the use of military force in favor of peaceful resolution and diplomacy. His unwavering stance, grounded in moral principles rather than political expediency, set him apart as a global moral leader who was willing to challenge powerful nations when their actions conflicted with the values he upheld. John Paul II also left an enduring legacy in the realm of interfaith relations, particularly in fostering greater understanding between Catholics and Jews. He played a historic role in healing centuries-old wounds between the two communities, setting a new tone of mutual respect and dialogue. Even as future generations may lose direct memory of communism's impact, they will likely remember the transformative shift in Catholic-Jewish relations that he helped to achieve by the end of the 20th century. While differences and disagreements between the two faiths will inevitably continue, John Paul II's efforts helped to reshape these tensions into more of a familial discourse, where disputes occur between brothers and sisters rather than adversaries. His initiatives also extended to the Muslim world, where he sought to build bridges of understanding, hoping that these efforts would bear fruit in the future. Despite his significant political and diplomatic influence, John Paul II saw his primary role as that of a teacher. His writings covered a wide range of topics, from deeply poetic reflections to scholarly theological works, reflecting a mind that sought to engage both the intellect and the spirit. He entered the papacy with a clear vision of how the teachings of the Second Vatican Council should be understood and implemented. After the upheaval that followed Vatican II, he felt a strong sense of duty to bring stability to the Church and to protect the core tenets of its faith, while also making these teachings relevant to the contemporary world. Yet, not all embraced his interpretations and teachings, and this opposition was likely one of the greatest disappointments of his papacy. John Paul II was often labeled a conservative, but this categorization oversimplified the complexity of his views. It is true that he maintained and emphasized traditional church teachings, and under his leadership, theologians who deviated from official doctrine were sometimes disciplined. However, his beliefs did not align neatly with the typical liberal-conservative divides, especially those common in American political discourse. While he stood firmly against abortion, contraception, same-sex marriage, the ordination of women, and the practice of a married clergy, one of the most vivid aspects of John Paul II's papacy was his pastoral outreach. His travels took him to nearly every corner of the world, where he attracted crowds by the millions. People gathered not just to see a religious figure, but to encounter a man of profound holiness and conviction. He did not waver in the face of difficult questions or shift his message to suit popular opinion. He spoke with a firmness and sincerity that made an impression even on those who disagreed with him. His presence inspired many, as he was seen as someone who genuinely cared for the people he encountered and who had made a tangible impact on the course of global events. In a time when many world leaders tailor their words to align with public opinion, consulting polls and focus groups before taking a stand, John Paul II stood out as a figure of unwavering principles. He spoke his mind clearly, often delivering challenging messages that went against the prevailing tides of the time. His willingness to stand firm in his beliefs won him respect, even among those who did not share his views. His authenticity, moral clarity, and willingness to address difficult topics made him a leader whose influence extended far beyond the boundaries of the Catholic Church, leaving a legacy that continues to resonate throughout the world. The life of Pope John Paul II is often viewed as a testament to divine purpose, a life shaped and guided by God to lead his church during a time of significant change. His papacy was marked by three distinct qualities that defined his approach to leadership: prayer, closeness, and mercy. Despite the immense responsibilities and countless demands placed upon him as Pope, he always made time for prayer. This constant communion with God was central to his life, allowing him to draw strength, wisdom, and compassion from his faith as he navigated the complexities of his role. St. John Paul II also embodied a deep sense of closeness to the people. He did not remain isolated within the walls of the Vatican, but instead journeyed far and wide, reaching out to people across the globe. This aspect of his character mirrored the relationship between God and his people as depicted in the Old Testament, where God is seen as intimately involved in the lives of his chosen people. The ultimate expression of this divine closeness is found in the Incarnation, when Jesus lived among humanity. In the same spirit, John Paul II sought to emulate Jesus, the Good Shepherd, extending his hand to people of all walks of life, whether they were influential leaders or ordinary citizens. His travels brought him into contact with millions as he made efforts to be present with those near and far, sharing in their joys, struggles, and hopes. One of the defining features of John Paul II's papacy was his unwavering commitment to justice. Yet his understanding of justice was always intertwined with mercy. He believed that true justice is never harsh or punitive, but is instead completed by mercy. His vision of a just world was one in which compassion and forgiveness play a central role. He advocated for a justice that recognizes the value of each human being, while offering mercy as a path to healing and reconciliation. In this way, he demonstrated that God's justice is not about retribution, but about extending a hand of mercy, offering the possibility of redemption and new beginnings. John Paul II faced the end of his life with profound courage and dignity, bearing the heavy cross of his declining health with patience. His final years were marked by a public struggle with illness, yet he adhered to the principles of Catholic bioethics, refusing extraordinary measures to prolong his life once it was clear that his time had come. His acceptance of suffering was a final lesson to the world, a living testament to his belief in the redemptive value of human suffering. He showed that a true shepherd leads not only in moments of strength, but also through vulnerability, guiding others by example even in his final days. His death left behind a legacy for others to continue his mission, urging the faithful to carry forward the message of Christ. John Paul II's teachings about the meaning of sickness, suffering, and death were not merely theoretical. They were grounded in his lived experience, reflected in the way he faced his own physical struggles and eventual passing. Through his actions and the words he spoke, he taught that to comprehend death with dignity, one must first recognize the inherent dignity of life. For him, human dignity was not something to be earned, but a gift bestowed by God. It was rooted in the belief that each person is created in the image of God, and thus possesses an intrinsic worth that cannot be diminished by any earthly circumstance. Quoting the Psalms, he reminded believers, "What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? You have made him little less than a god, and crowned him with glory and honor." This verse captures the essence of human dignity, a dignity that cannot be measured in material terms. John Paul II emphasized that humanity has been ransomed not with mere gold or silver, but with the precious blood of Christ. This theological perspective shaped his unwavering respect for life, from its beginning to its natural end. For many, John Paul II remains more than a canonized saint. He is remembered as a spiritual father, a friend, and a powerful intercessor. Pilgrims visiting his tomb often seek his guidance and prayers, feeling a connection to a leader who walked with them through times of joy and suffering. His legacy lives on through the memories of those whose lives he touched, and through the teachings he left behind, calling future generations to continue his mission of faith, compassion, and unwavering hope. His impact as a shepherd of souls and a global spiritual leader endures, making him a lasting symbol of a church that stands by the suffering, cares for the vulnerable, and brings the light of Christ to all corners of the world.